What's up, everyone? Tonight we're going to be live with Dave Skinks. He's going to be right back. He's trying to get something set up. That way it will stream on his channel and mine at the same time. So hopefully we're able to do that. That way we'll be live here and on his. So he'll be back shortly. If any of you have any questions that are here, now's a good time. I'll take a look in the comments. All right, Dave's back. We'll add him to the stage.
Through all the options, I never got the setting you spoke of. Oh, well.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess we'll just have to figure it out after. So how are you doing tonight?
Pretty well. It's been a long and busy day, but it went by real fast, just staying productive. And now I get the pleasure of chatting with my long-term Blue Tongue pals, fellow Midwesterner.
Yeah, I've talked to you on and off for years now. It's been,
I think about 8 years.
Sounds about right. So what is the origin story of Dave Skinks?
All I ever wanted was a dog. I started asking for a dog when I was 2 years old. And at that time, the parents had full say. So it was, well, can we buy you off with a goldfish? And it was, well, you can try. I'll accept the goldfish, but I still want the dog. And then it was, all right, how about some amphibians, some frogs, and some newts, bigger fish tanks, more elaborate fish tanks. Wait, let me mute my phone. Then it was small reptiles, anoles, leopard geckos. I've actually got a leopard gecko tattoo out of the first one that I got, and I think 1999 for my 8th birthday. And then it just kept growing and evolving. And I still really wanted a dog, but I realized that wasn't going to happen in my parents' house. Blue is my favorite color. And so I was researching blue lizards that I might be interested in. And there's not many blue lizards out there. You got the agamas, the collared lizards, and they're all really fast, not really handleable. And I kind of accidentally stumbled on the blue tongue skink. This is maybe 2004. And at that time, research was very limited. I believe the original website, bluetongueskinks.net, launched 2003, 2004, maybe 2005. It still looks like it's from that era. But I did pretty heavy research with the limited resources I had as a fresh bar mitzvah boy. And, internet is still in its new phases. And I researched for 2.5 years before I got my first. I was 15 or 16, and that was Dinobot, and she is still with me to this day. And I kept doing the pet thing until I left for college. And then I had to really downsize because my family couldn't take care of it. I went to college. I got a degree in entrepreneurship and small business management. And my graduation gift was a year at home rent-free.
Nice.
I accepted. And my parents sat me down before I moved home, and they said, you've got this entrepreneurial degree while you're figuring out your career or how you're going to get on Shark Tank. If you have an idea for a small home business that you want to start up, we won't financially support it, but we'll emotionally support it. Dedicate a section of the house for your project. And I said, well, thank you. Let me go back to the drawing board. And that was 2015, 2016. I would say that was the pinnacle moment of when hobbyists and pet keepers and even reptile collectors in the hobby really first grasped the interest in blue-tongued skinks. Before they were too rare and not well established or known. But that was the time where all the different colored morph genes were for the really first time getting expressed and widely available beyond this elitist circle that previously could only access them. And so I said, you know what? There's nobody doing it in the whole state of Illinois. I found somebody kind of on the west side on the Iowa border that was doing Marukes. Somebody else that was doing Irian Jayas, very small setups, 1 to 2 breeding couples, no real established presence online, really just a hobbyist. And I said, you know what? I think I can help push the hobby forward, as well as promote ethical keeping, which is something that was very close to my heart. And so I gathered up my savings and I bought a few Australian species. And then I kept adding a couple more lizards after that point, until right now I'm in year 9 in business, still with the original one that I had when I was a kid. And we've got 4 different species that we keep, 2 that we breed successfully. 9 years where we're active on most of the social media platforms, really trying to advance the hobby in favor of ethical keeping and breeding, and some I'm quite proud in. Not enough to quit the day job, but enough to have some fun and enjoy what I do.
Well, and that's some of the key right there, enjoying what you do. And, you got a lot of passion. And I guess I knew you were in it a while, and I'm horrible at telling people's ages. So I knew you were young, but I guess I never realized it was that young when you got your first one.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anything to keep a dog out of the house was my parents' mad interest, and
Well,
so
and
I,
it's I was just gonna say it's nice how pretty supportive they were, even though they weren't a huge fan of the dog idea. They at least tried to find something that you really enjoyed.
well, by the end, as I'm getting ready to leave for college, and they don't know how to take care of the animals to the degree that I do. I could leave instructions on how to keep them alive for a week or two, but for multiple semesters, it was impractical. And at that time, I had a 75-gallon, fully planted African cichlid aquarium. I had a 30-gallon, more than that, 49-gallon paludarium, with some tropical fish species in the lower half. I had a long-tailed lizard, some fire-bellied toads in the top half. And then my bedroom was decked out with leopard geckos, and the basement walls were lined with 75-gallon aquariums for, the start of what would be the Blue Tongue project. And I think they were scratching their heads like, maybe we should have just said yes to the damn dog at the beginning. But hindsight's always 2020.
Well, you've been at it 9 years. That's a long time, and you've grown quite a bit from a little kid. And you grew up in Illinois, you said, right?
I was born in Milwaukee area, and then by the time I was 3, I moved to the Chicago suburbs. I was part of a high school in the north suburbs that was in an 8 high school conference that included the Mean Girls High School, the Breakfast Club High School, and the Ferris Bueller's Day Off High School. So if you've seen any of those movies, that was the lifestyle I grew up in.
Pretty famous, yeah.
My high school wasn't featured, but
I thought you said yours was. My bad.
I was a part of an 8 high school conference, and I was one of the 8, and 3 of the other 8 were featured in those movies I mentioned.
Okay, I got you. So how was your first season breeding then?
Oh, it was catastrophic. So we were just breeding an Irian Jaya couple, and I didn't even have the male. I got the male on temporary loan from one of my buddies who also had a male Irian Jaya, and I didn't get the males for long. He gave me 2 males. I was able to breed each of them once to the female, so I would ultimately never know who would be the father. But I was so ill-experienced, I couldn't grasp the value of proving genetics to the eventual buyer's market. It really didn't work out. They were kept in the basement, which is like a standard 67, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which you can compensate with heat mats and UV lighting and other heat external sources. Unbeknownst to me, my father was rather unsettled with the entrepreneurial business that I had decided to cash in with their offer to start something up small in the house. And when I made this proposal, I'm going to be a reptile breeder. I'm going to build out on the blue tongue that I already have and create a sustainable business that develops a new generation of reptile enthusiasts, keepers that align with ethical treatment of the animal. And they were like, we've got a dictionary, but I have no idea what that means. Either way, we trust you, get to it. And then they pretty rapidly had buyer's remorse. So unbeknownst to me, my father, as soon as I would leave for the day, go to work or whatever I was doing, he would sneak into the basement, turn off all the power for all the animals. So while the females are trying to digest food and grow the litters inside of them, their heat was taken away. And then he would go turn it back on before I got home. So I would never know, but he fairly assumed this would cause problems for me, and he was right. And so all the babies were born very underweight. Some of them were stillborn. The oldest one survived 3 days, and it was catastrophic and devastating. And I was wondering, what did I do wrong? How come this has happened to me? And then my father revealed, well, I was hoping that they would die. I've been turning off their heat every day while you've been gone. And so I moved out shortly after that.
Can't blame you.
Yeah.
That's it makes sense why it went so horrible. That's very disheartening first experience at breeding too.
Yeah, it really, really was. I don't handle death well, kind of necrophobia with that. And it was quite overwhelming. It still disturbs me to this day what I had to encounter, what I had to do as the business operator, and also trying to balance family life. You'd hope that family wouldn't embrace you, only to secretly sabotage you. But you don't get to choose your parents.
No, and especially after they kind of gave you the idea on, hey, start a business.
Welcome to my family.
So when you first got into it, how hard was it to get the needed supplies, like, the heat lights? I probably wasn't UVB back then.
That wasn't the challenge. I mean, everything is available on either Amazon or Chewy. And if I need something in an emergency, Petco, PetSmart. It was the enclosures themselves. Front-facing enclosures were not common. There was really only a few small brands. Well, not small. I guess within the reptile hobby, they were quite prominent. Like I want to say like the Vision cages and the Boa file cages, if you remember those. I don't even think these businesses are still around anymore. But that's pretty much all there was. And they were real expensive, and it was kind of shady shopping online. Are they the right dimensions? Are they going to suit the needs for this particular animal? What's the return policy? And all right, well, the price of the cage is one thing. How much is shipping that large enclosure to me? And then I still got all the substrate, and I got to wire it for heat and what have you. And so I made do with 75-gallon aquariums used off of Craigslist. Craigslist was still a hot website when I first got into the game. And It took a few years to build up a Rolodex of business for custom reptile manufacturers. And now custom reptile manufacturers, particularly front-facing ones, it's a very successful business. I've probably got a list of about 15 businesses that I trust and can verify, do good work, respond to emails, deliver a quality, reliable product to kind of shop and compare who's going to give you what you need within your budget. I'm actually working on revamping the website right now. that will feature a shop section where you can get things that weren't available before, fun items like apparel items to support Dave Skinks. But I'm also going to be listing just about every third-party product that I buy or other businesses that align with my values for supporting ethical keeping within the hobby that other users can tune into for advice. And so I'd say getting those custom enclosures, getting enclosures exactly the way that I wanted, what I felt would be best for the reptiles. That was easily the biggest challenge. I ran through a few builders, didn't quite know what they were doing, really didn't work out. And I would say it wasn't until years 5 or 6 that I assembled the right partners to provide the necessary supplies for a sustainable operation.
So throughout the years, I've noticed you have tried a lot. What is your favorite now?
I'm still working on perfecting the ideal and most optimal custom blue tongue enclosure. I really like PVC as the base of the frame. It's durable. It won't mold or degrade. The worst comes to worst, you might have to re-silicone the seams, and I've only had to do that for one of them once. You can probably get 30 years out of it. I like to use sliding glass doors, but I've continually enhanced the model, adding in windows on the sides. The next build that I do would also include like a computer fan or a breeder's incubator fan somewhere in the corner to simulate wind and airflow. And I think that would make the enclosure even healthier and the lizard even happier. That's probably going to be really the only change I do on the next build from the last custom build that I did. I was able to acquire the massive reptile racks. The internal dimensions, I think, are 55 inches it's 55 inches deep. No, 48. It's 48 inches wide. No, I'm bad with numbers. It's 50 inches wide, 55 inches wide, 30 inches deep. That's the dimensions. It's an unusual dimension. They don't even make them anymore. They've made a slightly bigger and a slightly smaller size. 48 by 24, I think, is pretty standard, both for blue tongues and just what manufacturers use. This is 55 by 30. They're pull-out drawers. I had to install lighting in them, make sure that they have fresh windows so they get a view and I get to view them. And it's working out really, really nicely. But in order to get UV light in there, which they don't have right now, I would need to elevate each level to fit UV light in there. And so that's probably the next project I want to enhance their enclosures with. It's the only enclosure I have right now that does not use UV light. I have a sample test run to be the guinea pig that verifies UV light is indeed substantially better for their long-term health and wellness. I'll attest that so far in the year or 18 months I've had this rack that has non-UV light. The reptiles have not noticed a difference. However, they're all adults, and I think UV in captivity is imperative towards skeletal health in the growth and development stage of the babies.
It's definitely beneficial. I've heard rumors of a product that's in development that I have no clue when will be available, that it's more or less UVB strip light that you could somehow attach to the racks that VivTech was working on.
Ooh.
So
well, they're a good company.
It's kind of like the string lights that people use now to light up their room, but UVB.
I would be highly interested in that project. Very highly interested. That would save me a lot of headaches trying to figure out how to modify the existing rack that I have to accommodate UV light. That would be huge. I would be a huge proponent of that product and that company.
I think if they can get it and it works great, it will be a, kind of a game changer, and it will benefit multiple industries across the hobby.
I agree. Because racks are probably sadly so prominent in our hobby. All we can do is lead by example and encourage to ask questions and make ourselves available if anybody wants to elevate themselves and make that change on behalf of the animals and their representation within the hobby is kind of the model that I gravitated towards with Happy Dragons, which is an online marketplace similar to Morph Market or King Snake or Fauna Classifieds, except they have a volunteer panel of ethical breeders that align with the company, and they serve as judges for your submission. Will and can you be a seller on their website? So if you're a buyer, you can ensure everybody on Happy Dragons is a breeder dedicated to ethical keeping for the hobby and on behalf of the reptile, which I really gravitate towards. And that was their big lesson and takeaway is, don't harp on anybody who's doing something different than you. Don't attack them. Lead by example and make yourself available in case they're interested in, seeing the light.
And I think a good thing to add, approach them, kindly when they reach out, not negatively if their setup's not perfect, try to guide them the right way.
Yeah. And I'll admit, especially in my first few years, coming from the pet side of the things to the business side of the things, I was in complete shock. And I was quite overwhelmed by the lack of interest in these prominent business professionals within the reptile industry, just not caring for their well-being. It was all about profits, minimizing expenses, and it was tough not to get emotional about it. Really, really tough. My solution has been to stay off social media more. I'm still somewhat active. I still post, but I just can't dedicate so much time into all the groups, into all these posts, witnessing somebody who's just taking so much pride in their absolute bare minimum minimalistic approach to keeping the animal alive. It's tough to deal with, especially when you got a big heart for these four-legged creatures.
Yeah, and some of the groups are better than others, but it seems like overall they're slowly getting better. Like I'm only on them so much.
Momentum is on our side. I think it was right around 2016 or so when I really started getting into the Australian species. That was the moment where there was this shift and demand from pet keepers and other breeders, other hobbyists saying, you know what? We can do better. We should do better. The resources are available. We're all sharing information. Let's elevate ourselves. And it's really shunned people from the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s who had been doing it one way for decades. That was a very minimalistic approach. And their counter argument is, listen, all my animals are alive. They don't have medical issues. They live long lives. Sadly, though, it discounts the quality of life and the embracement of their personality and their individualism, and trying to duplicate or replicate as much of a naturalistic environment within captivity as reasonably possible from their human caretaker. So I'm real happy with the momentum that has been on all of our sides. I've seen your business, your hobby, Blazing Blue Tongues. It's grown and evolved quite a bit. You've easily surpassed me in terms of sheer volume, different species you care for, and different animals you work with. I'd love to learn a little bit about your journey.
What would you like to know?
Well, I think you came in. You started in my second year of business. This is your 8th year. Am I correct?
So it was either 2017, like, or beginning of 2018. I first started like, so I had a blue tongue, and I first started we wanted to get more, and that's when I found out about the groups, and that's kind of where it started growing and going downhill, I guess you'd say.
Was that the old hobbyist group?
So I pretty much we joined most of them, from the hobbyist to the Australian one, the complete, and uh was the other one, the enthusiast that used to be
Maybe
around.
that was the enthusiast group. Was that the real big one?
Yeah,
Yeah. Was Deb a moderator on that?
that's the hobbyist one.
Is
The
that the one that's still around? Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't remember who was the admin of the enthusiast group, but that was easily the biggest one. But there's just a lot of toxicity, which I think comes to the nature of the lack of human interaction. Somebody on the other side of the computer, you don't really know them, you don't really get to know them, and it's easy to push negative rhetoric, especially when you feel this entitlement that you're right, your opinion is right, and you're advocating for the animal against a human that's taking the wrong approach. And I'll admit that, especially in my early days, I was guilty of that. Every once in a while, it still gets me when I see somebody blatantly wrong, blatantly rejecting solid and sound advice, and it comes at the cost of the animal. Because I'd rather advocate for the animal than the human. I'm sure as much of us are who get into the hobby. But I think since 2016, momentum has been on our side, and we're just going to keep pushing the envelope until everybody is on board with ethical keeping and naturalistic, spacious environments, varied diet, enrichment. Enrichment is huge. Enrichment wasn't around when I was doing my research in the very early 2000s. Enrichment was not around when I'd go to a pet store as a very little kid in the 90s and try to learn about animals from who I thought were experts at the time. In reality, the pet shops, brick and mortar, they're just like transaction spaces for animals, and they quite often don't know what they get, what they have, best practices to care for them. They just say what they need to say to make the sale happen because they got a business to run, a family to feed, overhead, with liabilities that they need to cover. And now that I'm a business owner, I get it, but I still think we can all do better. And the best way to do that is to take initiative under our own helm, try to lead by example.
well, and there's still a lot of not the best quality pet shops out there, but there's a lot more that are, you know, enthusiasts, hobbyists that actually care and want to learn the right way. So it, like you said, we're all going towards the right direction.
I agree. There was a very prominent, highly ethical, exotic reptile shop near me called Chief Reptile. They recently closed doors. I'm not quite sure why. But then there's a few others that have popped up that I've stopped in and I've been really impressed with. Zootropic is one of them near me. And then there's others that I won't name where the people running them are just really nasty and you've too much poop in the enclosures. And it's just unsettling. And it's like, all right, I don't need to take you down, but you're not going to get my support. And I hope that the people that really do care triumph. In the 90s, I could go into a pet shop and I could get a skunk or a raccoon, not even a captive bred one, just like it was like captured and made available to minors. Very, very different time than today. And so I like the momentum that we're all elevating ourselves towards. Hey, we tangented so bad. So you started 2018.
Yep.
You started with a few northern blue tongues, right?
Yep. So I started with one and then that we got from my sister-in-law. She how so at the time they started working for a pet store, and then they became co-owners and started their own. So the one I got for free from them, he was born with a birth defect, and he was shipped from a bigger company that uh, breeds northerns and has multiple pet stores, and they shipped three together. And he got picked on by the other ones. He was missing 8 to 10 toes, and he was very weak. She was able to grind up like crickets and dog food and syringe feed him and get him going. And now he's thriving, doing good. He still has, a birth defect and missing the toes, but he gets around fine and living his best life. He's
Love
just a
hearing.
happy pet.
I
And
like
then,
hearing good stories like that with the end outcome, living its best life. That's what we want, right? We got a pet
yep,
to spoil it, hopefully.
yep. And then, so I got a mail from that store that uh, they got for someone else that surrendered it. And then through um, another breeder, we got one from Ray, and then another two directly from Ray. And that's kind of what started our main group off. And we went from 5 to, give or take, 40, 50
Wow.
between everything.
So is it all species or just the different subspecies of blue tongue? Because I know you work with a few other lizards as well.
So yeah, we got 3 Berbers, a single Gidgee, 3 pet only Beardies, uh, and then a trio of Blotches, and the rest Northerns.
You were breeding bearded dragons initially, am I mistaken?
We did 2 seasons of one pairing each. We did that kind of with our brother and sister-in-law, and then those kind of just went to their store. With as many that are out there, I don't see a need to no real need to breed beardies, I guess. You just add to the population that there's enough already good breeders doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we kept the pet ones and switched focus more to just blue tongues, and then we do some feeder insects on the side also that mainly is wholesale-ish, just not add too much for us.
It's always good to have multiple revenue streams in business.
Yep, and we do a couple expos here and there, so it's something else to bring with the blue tongues. They're a good nutritious feeder for the blue tongues and add some nice diversity to their diet.
I agree. I've quite often been contemplating about getting into the bug game, at the very least, just to lower my own food costs, learn a new skill set in the animal hobby. But the next skink that I really want to get into are the Kenyan zebra skinks. They're clan oriented. They live with their family. You don't even want to separate the babies for many weeks, maybe even several months from the parents, because they all live in harmony together. And that's the environment I like to generate within my business and within my home, but 90% of their diet is live insects, and I would be running a massive deficit using my time and money to get them fresh insects every time. So in order to really get into the Kenyans, you need stable colonies of a few different bugs. And so every year I teeter between, is this the time I'm going to get into it? And then life happens and you become preoccupied and realize you don't want to spread yourself too thin, especially when it comes to taking care of the animals. How would you say, with an even bigger operation than me, do you manage time to the best of your abilities?
So it helps having a lot of moving parts, I guess you don't see. Like, my wife does a lot. My friend Danny helps a lot, anywhere from, depending on the time of year, 5 to 20 hours a week. And then, we got multiple older stepkids and daughter of my own that she's not the biggest reptile fan, but if there's something that we need help on, they're willing to usually help.
I think having a support system is imperative towards this level of success. Every once in a while, I got some friends that join in, especially before I got into bioactive. And every year or every 6 months or so, I was taking down the enclosures, sanitizing them, fresh substrate. The enclosures are big, and I needed some muscle, and so I would rally the troops of friends 1 or 2 days of the year. If I have a steady girlfriend, usually she's quite in the mix. But predominantly, it's heavy head rests the crown. It's all on me, and I got to manage everything else in life. And the animals are dependent on me, so they got to take priority. And as an individual, you make sacrifices for them, totally. So I think it's great that you've got this support system, this support network, because I think I'm kind of maxed out in terms of the bandwidth that I can dedicate towards this business as a sole individual. So I'm envious of the support you've got.
Well, and that's one thing that you got to keep in mind. You don't want to get too big for or the animals suffer, unless you pick up a new girlfriend in your case, or hire someone or add some help, or that's where it's kind of hard to decide, because you get into reptiles and you want 10 of everything, but you can't take care of 10 of everything.
Yeah, very much so. Eyes certainly become bigger than the stomach.
Yeah. And we kind of rotate periodically to keep the number down. That way we don't get too big. Plus, room's always an issue. I'm guessing you might be getting close to maxed out.
I am. I'm fully maxed out on space. If you've seen some of my other Instagram videos, Facebook, or YouTube, previously, most of the skinks were in my kitchen. And it was actually really great having them in there because I'm always in the kitchen cooking, doing something. It seems to be the social room that a lot of guests like to congregate in. So they'd approach the glass. They're always interested and intrigued, being very inquisitive. What's going on? And you'd be working at the counter, chopping up some vegetables, and you just get this eerie sense of you're being watched. And you'd turn around, and there's a dozen set of eyes pressed against the glass, just staring at you. What's this bipedal doing? So I miss them in the kitchen. But my roommate, the last roommate I had, moved out. I thought my life was going a different direction with somebody special. It ultimately didn't work out. But my day job was enough to cover the bills. And I said, you know what? I'm in my 30s now. I don't need a roommate. and I moved all the reptiles into their very own reptile room, which has been a dream of mine since I was probably in like the 3rd grade. And I started seeing some people with fully dedicated reptile rooms, and I was like, I want that. And now I've got it.
It is nice. Before we moved, we had, a mobile home that part was in our bedroom, part was in the living room, kitchen area, and you make do. Yeah, and it is, like you said, it is nice having them right there, though, too.
Yeah, but as you added to, when you're working with limited square footage, they say you're not a true reptile person until you have reptiles in multiple rooms. And while most were in the kitchen, some were in the bedroom, some were in the living room. Sometimes they escape and you just find them all over the place. I was sitting on the toilet once and it scurries by my feet, and I'm like, oh, how'd you get out? I gotta do something about this. And sometimes that happens. Fortunately, now they're all confined into the reptile room, but it still has a finite amount of square footage. And I think with the bandwidth of my time and the physical space, I really am maxed out. Maybe some small bug colonies could be added in, but yeah, I'm tapped out.
That's where maybe like doing supplemental mealworms or something might be beneficial, because those colonies are smaller.
Yeah, and
I
there's this UK company. They're pretty new. I think they're about 2 years old. It's something like honeycomb hives or something. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So they make these. They're shaped like a honeycomb, kind of like an octagon. They're about this thick, and they give you 3 of them. So they sit on top of each other. So they're only about this tall, all 3 of them, and they're yay big. Maybe about 20 inches, 21 inches in diameter. Each level is for a different stage of the bug. They have a mealworm kit. They have a super worm kit. Tons of other bugs that I haven't even heard of, dubia roaches. And so you can order these hexagons, and they're not terribly big, and they're thin, and they stack, and you can have a very modest in-home bug colony, and that's what I've been contemplating getting into. Nothing massive, tank oriented, just something small, niche, that would provide for the Kenyans, whether I get into them or not, or the blue tongues, or just enjoy having a different species in my home that I care for.
What an option is, and it won't be as cheap as, growing your own or breeding your own, if you buy like 10,000 smalls at once, or, whatever number.
That's a
And
high
then
number.
well, this one I pulled out. And you grow them up to, larges, or, bigger sizes that you would feed your adult blue tongues, or, well, the Kenyans might need mediums or larges, that you pay less per roach, but same thing, you'll need a spot to grow them up. So you'll want, a 27-gallon colony that you're going to need a 2-foot by 3-foot spot to keep it.
Remind me again, what are all the bugs that you've gotten into? And are you doing both isopods or just feeder insects, or something unusual just for the fun of it?
So we are 99.9% dubia, and we have some small isopod springtail colonies that we're growing up to do more bioactive. So nothing real lucrative or big scale on that end.
I love the hobbies pivot. It went from, minimalistic, let's keep the animal alive, to more spacious, naturalistic opportunities for the animal, offering enrichment. And now there's been this movement of going bioactive. And there's quite a range on how you can accomplish this feat, but it supports a naturalistic environment. The bugs seem to live harmoniously with the reptiles in their enclosure, feeding off of mold, poop, bacteria, things you don't want in the tank. That's fuel to their fire, and they're keeping the tank warm and the reptile happy. It makes my job easier, having to clean up after them substantially less. And because I'm cleaning up after them substantially less, I don't really have to take down the enclosures, sanitize them, add in fresh substrate. So that's a reduction on my annual expenses. I just kind of top it off before brumation with some fresh organic topsoil or sphagnum and peat moss, maybe some cypress mulch. And, I always circulate and airflow the tank just by getting my hands in and mixing it all up. And that also seems to support the isopods population for development. I had a buddy also in Chicago who's working with a lot of different species, not breeding, just being an awesome caretaker. And he started getting into isopods. He gave me like 30 or 40 two years ago. I think that's all it was. So I put the 30 or 40 in one enclosure, and he said in about 100 days, you'll have a stable population that you can take out, transport to another enclosure. That original one will build back up their numbers. A population will really form in the second tank. And all 22 of my tanks have stable isopod colonies right now. Theoretically, as I revamp my website with a shop section, I might be able to include isopods as an offering. I've played around with powdered orange, powdered blues, and dwarf whites. In between the fluctuations of humidity and temperatures, especially with brumation, the only population that has really thrived, for me at least, are the powdered oranges. And now I've got tens of thousands.
And I'm kind of surprised like the dwarf whites didn't also, but maybe just the coldness.
Everybody's competing for the same food, and I think the powdered oranges are they're bigger and bullier, and they're more committed.
Them.
Yeah, there's only so much nutrients to go around. It happens everywhere in the environment. Stable populations dwindle when a bigger predator comes in, takes over their space, their food resources, and becomes the dominant species. Every once in a while, I still find a random blue, or I do notice a random dwarf white. But in terms of really stable, really thriving populations, it's just the powdered oranges for me.
One thing you'll want to keep in mind if you do add them to your store, I haven't followed a ton up on it. There is a permit you're supposed to have to ship those.
Oh, really?
And
I didn't know that. Good thing you warned me.
Only select ones you can ship. I used to have more, and then during the move, I lost a colony, so I just kind of...
Sorry to hear that.
It happens. The focus was the animals. We kept all those. That went perfect. But
I guess I'll look into that. Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble with Uncle Sam.
Yeah, it's through APHIS, and I don't know how hard it is because I've never personally applied for it.
How is it going with your master sites permit? And for anyone who doesn't know, Indonesian blue tongues, they're their own game. Indonesia allows you to import, export to the U.S. regularly. There's no qualms about it. But Australian species are so highly desired in like the late 60s or 70s. Australia put an international gag order disallowing the export of their native species and trying their best to curb the movement of their native species between nations. And that kept building and growing until, oh, I like this. Joey Rayburn. All right. Glad to hear it. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but
Yep, I popped it up so you
yeah, he's going bioactive. Like I said, lead by example. It's the best we can do. But it culminated in an amendment to the Lacey Act. I forgot Lacey's first name, but he was like the pioneer of U.S. national parks. And so anything kind of natural wildlife legislation oriented for this country, it all falls within the Lacey Act. And now the Lacey Act is just so diverse, thousands of pages long. Nobody knows every detail to it anymore. And so when they tried to make an addendum to the Lacey Act, they tried to make, 1,000 pages of change. And then they paper clipped like 2 paragraphs in back that would disallow the movement of Australian species in or out of the United States. And so as of June 21st, 2022, was it? Or 2021?
2022.
Yeah, so June 21st, 2022, the U.S. has no longer been legally allowed to import or export Australian native species. So I used to be in communication with a lot of Canadian breeders, keepers, importers, exporters. They would do deals on U.S. keepers' behalf for other areas, the Netherlands, UK, China, Korea, anywhere where we could trade with good people. And thanks to, I believe, Marco Rubio, no more. And so it's changed our ability within the hobby to conduct sales and trade for diverse genetics. But there's like this unusual loophole where an established business like us can apply for a CITES permit, where if we can show proof that this animal has always been in captivity, generations back, was not in Australia. It's for all intents and purposes, it's an American animal and should be treated as such. And I haven't taken the full steps to get the master's CITES permit. But Alex, you've traveled this road. I'd love to hear just how rocky it is and if there's a rainbow at the end.
So we'll start from the beginning. So most Australian species were turned into CITES 2, which basically they're going to track the, movement and trade of them to, in turn, try to prevent smuggling coming from Australia to wherever they end up. But the problem, it's going to make it harder for captive breeders like us to send our animals to other countries. So with CITES 2, you can get permits issued and even a master CITES to make that process easier. So the process to get the master CITES is long, and we spent $400 in 6 months to get approved for it. The problem then with government, one department doesn't always work with the other. So the one department approves us, but the inspectors that allow them out of the country said none can go out, no matter what permit you currently have.
And this is U.S. Fish and Wildlife or other customs agencies?
Yeah, U.S. Fish and Wildlife inspectors.
So they're the ones who issued the permit and typed up
Nope.
No.
It's Department of Interior that does the permits.
Okay.
That's their department, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife is the one that inspects whatever that goes in and out of the country. So you got to prove all your animals are good. Long story short, you get the thing that's supposed to make it easier. You you try to apply to, ship them out, and you get denied. They don't allow any out. So there is a current lawsuit by USARK, but
Who everyone should be supporting.
yes, the downside, we are waiting for a court date that doesn't seem like they want to give us one.
Oh, bureaucracy.
So what happens after that? It's hard to get governments moving. Who knows? Could be 1 month, could be 5 years.
We just got to grease some palms. Do it the old Chicago politics way.
Yeah. You volunteering?
No, but I'll give a little bit more money to USARK to hopefully get the ball rolling on our side.
Yeah, and it's hard because they can only do so much with, they need the court date to get things rolling, and it's not up to them who decides when that date is.
And I don't know of any politicians that are really advocating for the breeders and the business side of things. It's other politicians who take money from these animal rights groups that have never worked with the animals. They're just under the full impression if the genetics haven't changed for domestication, they should really be just tossed outside and left in the wild. Which would doom every reptile in captivity. And then you've got representatives from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, a few other states where some unfortunately poor choiced reptile keepers released their animals into the wild. They really did with these crazy animal activists' requests, and the animals started thriving in those states. And they're now invasive species that are really detrimental to the existing wildlife and just everything that goes on around the Everglades. And it's quite scary and intimidating. What do you do? Are you just in the animal killing business, or do you let the animals take over and conquer the land? And it's I sympathize with individuals in the states who have to deal with those complex decisions. I don't envy them. It's because it's a tough tightrope to walk.
Yeah, and it's hard when the people sometimes greasing their palms would like us not to ever have any more pets.
Damn
Ever.
right. Yeah.
It's the sadness of it, certain organizations don't like us.
How have you seen the hobby develop, and how much were you into the hobby as a pet keeper before getting into the business side of things?
So we weren't really super, I guess, in the grand scheme hobby, the main one. Even now, we don't currently do any like the big shows like Tinley or any of that. I would call it a slow transition, as especially at first we were kind of more on the outside looking in.
Yeah, that feeling. When I was just a pet keeper, I was really only accidentally connecting with other pet keepers. I was also a minor. This is even before I had a driver's license, before the dawning age of prominent access to the internet and all the resources available. BlueTongueSkinks.net, which is still around. I still think that their message board is active, but the website hasn't been updated since 2015. There just weren't resources around unless you were one of these, super kind of elitist reptile people where your name was well circulated amongst the hobby and you might have had hundreds or thousands of reptiles, and that's kind of how your name got out there. Brian, may he rest in peace. He talked about getting into the hobby when he was a teenager, and I think he had developed his business so prominent that he was buying a house in his early 20s or maybe even his late teens. We probably won't ever get that big, but to the average person who's just a pet keeper, as I kind of said before, I was overwhelmed by seeing these almost like puppy mill style reptile operations with bare minimum minimalistic reptile racks, very small, no enrichment. And now momentum is on our side because we're sharing information, and we're sharing information internationally with other people in the hobby. When I first got into the business, 2015, 2016 or so, there was all this negative feedback on China. China is buying and selling and killing. They don't know what they're doing. And now some breeders in Hong Kong, they're some of my most reliable resources to trade information and best care practices for ethical keeping. Same with Korea. And, in Indonesia, even Indonesia for the longest time had this reputation of they're just collecting animals from the wild, and the easiest ones to collect are the most sickly. But now they're farm raising them, which is essentially a captive operation, just completely outdoors, which you can do because that's the environment they naturally come from. But some of the best ones that I network with in Indonesia won't ship them internationally because of the stress it puts on the animal. They have, drawn their line in the sand. I'm going to advocate for ethical captive husbandry within my country, promote that locally, but they won't ship internationally. And I'd love to get their genetics, but I respect that they've drawn this line in the sand of we won't put the animals through this stressor of an international shipment where something can go wrong. Boxes get tossed, mishandled. I once had a FedEx delivery driver spinning the live animal box like a basketball on her, and I catch him doing that. And I go, "Hey!" and he quickly stops and tucks it underneath his side, and now it's turned on its side, which isn't much better for the animal. And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing? Live animal, this way up. It's got the bright red stickers on it, arrows, live animal everywhere. How do you not notice?" I never look at the box. And it's things like that where it's like, okay, we as a hobby still have some growth to do. And so I hope a podcast like this, continues to inspire people to do their best, keep doing better, keep pushing the envelope. That's all we can do is ask.
I think one thing too, like coming from Indonesia here, depending on where in Indonesia, not all of it's as well developed either. So that process might be a little harder on the animals too.
Yeah. Especially with, Indonesia, it's made up of hundreds, if not thousands of islands. And so going from hand to truck to boat to truck, be on unpaved road, to wherever they're going to end up. It's a bumpy road that the animal shouldn't have to go through. Hopefully, if it is going to go through that, it's into the hands of well-researched, prolific caretaker. And I think the blessing of the internet and social media is our ability to share all this information, the willingness to share what we had learned. I think, maybe 20, 30 years ago, there was huge hesitation to share information. There was this elitist attitude of, I figured out what to do, and I'm not just going to give away everything that I've built upon. And I get that. You did put in the effort to figure out what works and what doesn't work. But if the common denominator is what's in the best interest of the animal, we've got to share what we have going on, which is why Dave Skinks, has such a publicly available, well-detailed and curated care section on our website. and it'll never be truncated. We're just going to keep beefing it up with new information that we learn, something that is proven after multiple years or disproven as well. For years, I was taught that you could freeze substrate, and the cold temperatures, the frigid temperatures, would kill bacteria. It would kind of deactivate mold spores and other, microscopic substances that could do harm to you or the animal. And that's what I advertised. That's what I did. And then I had one season where in brumation, it gets so cold, the reptile's immune system drops. They're more susceptible to problems. And a few of them woke up with this unusual skin infection. It was almost like, when when air gets really dry and you get chapped lips or like cracked fingers, cracked toes. It was like that. And it was ultimately a bacterial infection that had clung on to them during brumation from the, Lowe's or Home Depot purchased substrates that I was using, because the freezing method wasn't working. And so I changed up my care guide and let everyone know, hey, what I was professing for the last few years, it's obsolete information. If you want to sanitize your substrate, you got to bake it. The bacteria will only get killed off with heat. And so we learn from our mistakes. We admit when we didn't do something right and just try to move forward with the best information we can supply. And I think that comes from, a change in culture within the hobby, of a willingness to build upon past research that is communal by everybody involved.
Yeah, we're constantly learning, improving as we go, and hopefully, more products will even come out to continue to make our lives, easier, and the animals' lives better also in return too.
I would agree. With the different species of blue tongue that you keep and the different types of skinks that you've gotten into, I'd love to hear different personalities and kind of behavioral quirks that you've noticed, not just from individual animal to individual animal, which there's plenty of, especially in the blue tongue world. Definitely each individual one has their own personality. But what would you say are some common things you've noticed species to species that you like or don't enjoy or is just interesting?
So we'll start with the Berbers. They are a smaller, little more flighty skink, but they calm down relatively easy. Mine are captive bred.
Do you know
That
how
I
many generations?
What's that?
Do you know how many generations in captivity?
I'm not 100%. So they were produced in Europe, and then Pat, breeder in Canada, bought them, and I got them through him. So I am not 100%. But that being said, they weren't bitey or anything ever, but they were a little flighty. Where now I can handle them a little bit. I'm sure if you put a lot, if you put more time to it, you could definitely even get them more calmer. But the, I guess, downfall, the more you get, the harder it is to give that one-on-one time to, every animal.
Of course.
Um, but that being said, I think they have a lot of promise. They have some nice colors. They got some nice oranges, relatively easy care. They can be kept in groups, or I should say pairs and trios, but doesn't always work out that way. I had to separate one female because she would not get along with the others. So we have a lone female girl that we actually got to breed separate 2 days ago or something like that. So we chance for eggs, but no real huge expectations, being the first time that we're seeing any successful breeding activity.
And do your Berbers, do the mothers self incubate the eggs, or you've got to extract them and have a separate area, resources, supplies, expenses that you've dedicated to the hobby to making sure the eggs grow and develop into future Berber skinks?
To have better success rate, yes. There probably you could maybe do it if you got your egg box set up in the right spot, that in the humidity is good and all that they could make it full term in the enclosure. I think it'd probably be better to incubate them, and whether you have a nice custom incubator or there's DIY cooler incubators that are pretty inexpensive. And for us, we have there are only egg layers, so we're going to be using our friend's incubator if we do get eggs. So that's one expense we don't really have to worry about. And then we have only one male Gidgee. We had a female that passed.
Sorry to hear that.
Some reason they bred and they were doing good. She was eating. She went off food. And as you know, some females will go off food when they're gravid. So, I just assumed she was gravid. And probably a week or two later, she was gone. I didn't do a necropsy, so I'm not 100% sure what happened. But doesn't really make sense. The male's still doing great. So it wasn't any bacteria. She had no, real wounds other than, you could see a little roughing on the scales from breeding, which is kind of natural with reptiles. But male's still doing good. He's handleable. He's pretty calm. He wasn't super handleable at first, but over time I had to give him some injections. He came with a little bump on his nose that ended up being more of a abscess that had to get treated at the vet. And then the blotches, we have a small group of 3. Behavior, they're pretty super calm at first. That transition period, they were a little huffy, but they're for the most part handleable, calm. I've had my younger kind of stepson. He's my daughter's brother from someone else that's not me, but he comes around that he's even handled them, and he's 5, so they're for the most part great pets. They are harder to breed and more challenging, which is looking like our male is not in the mood to breed again this year, but we'll see what happens in the end. It could be a little early.
You got to make the blotches real cold, right? They're the coldest living blue tongue species.
Yeah, so you could probably get away less than 60 maybe, but it sounds like to successful you want to get in, hitting that 50 mark, where even I had a couple nights in the high 40s.
Yeah.
Where we turned an old incubator, we tossed some wood on it and some insulation and made a cool box to bring the cold air from outside, to do a cheaper method than buying some of the more expensive fridges or the new incubator that's an incubator and a cooling chamber. But overall, there's people working with them that hopefully I can add more over time and get them rolling to more people out there.
Very
Just
good.
I I've heard that they're one of the calmest, but I have such a small group I cannot honestly say.
Well, I hope
Um,
you get to expand your blotchy empire soon enough.
if all goes well, the need everything to line up and timing to be right for that to work out.
God willing.
Yeah. Um what about you? Are you planning on adding anything new?
I mean, I would love to get into rugosa, the western shinglebacks.
Okay.
There's so few in the country. We can't get any more. There's only one individual out of Florida who publicizes his group. I'm connected with his son mostly. I don't want to name drop people who haven't given express permission to, because even with public accounts, sometimes they're a little weird. So I'm just really hoping that some things come out of there. Where'd you go?
What's that?
Are you still there? Oh, you just
Yep.
totally disappeared from my screen. How the heck did I get you back? There you
Yep.
are.
I'm
How did it
still
happen?
here.
Just my whole screen just blinked for a second. Like you just saw my background in my computer. So rugosa, the western shinglebacks, which I've been advised are the personality is a lot more like a tortoise, like a red-footed tortoise maybe. But they're also kind of family and clan oriented. It'll rarely thrive with just one. If you're going to get just one, you got to find a totally different species that it can live harmoniously with. They're very family oriented, and so it's tough to separate them. If they're going to breed, they're going to breed either a single or more often twins. Every once in a while, you get triplets. But again, it's tough to sell them because they're such a family oriented animal. You don't want to separate a $10,000 lizard just to have it perish from stress. And then the clan that you hung on to, they get stressed out, missing whoever you parted ways with. So that's the dream. And I've got a slush fund available if I can make it happen, but I'm not too hopeful. And then I have one single Centralian. I had what was supposed to be a breeding pair. Um, I don't mind tarnishing this one individual, the urban reptile or urban gecko out of Canada. That guy is shady, and I regret every second of every day trusting him with my money. He sold me what was advised as a confirmed breeding couple out of a captive breeder out of China, which already sounds a little sketchy, but also not impossible. And he spoke a reasonable game, and I believed him. He was so massive and a big reputation, and again, I believed him. What arrived to me were two Centralians on death's doorstep. Crusty eyes, foaming white at the mouth, excessively small, excessively skinny, excessively hollow bellies from blatant starvation. So I immediately got them both to the vet. They were both really on death's doorstep. What I believe is the female, though unconfirmed, made a recovery. It really took almost 2 full years until she was really thriving. But her counterpart, the presumed male, he got medicine right away and died on day 10 with me. And it's been so tricky to get another. And there are another blue tongue species that can cohab. They don't need to necessarily as much as the rugosa does, but they totally can. And every once in a while, some pops up on the market, but it's high risk. To me, as we've already established, I'm maxed out on time, just human capital, resources, and physical space that I can dedicate for them. Let's say I find a single lone male, but they don't get along. Turns out I do have two males, or even just a boy and a girl, and they just don't get along. Well, now I'm housing two individual Centralians that will never breed, and I've already got one as a pet, and I enjoy it as a pet. But at the end of the day, I've got a business to operate. I can't just invest in personal dreams all the time, or I'll be running a deficit real fast. And then so a confirmed breeding pair, I check frequently. I've never seen it on the US market. If anybody knows a confirmed breeding pair of Centralians, I would be totally open and interested. But it's just tricky because there's so few in the country. I know 3 individuals that have at least one pair. 2 of the 3 have 3 or more, up to a few sets. They're either not breeding them successfully, or they're just not advertising available babies to me, which, if you have got these very rare, very elite reptiles, I understand wanting to be so coveted with what you have, because there's unfortunately shady people in the industry that are looking to, crush any of your hopes and dreams. Robbery, theft, intimidation. And so I definitely can't name drop them, but 3 people in the whole country with the prospects of offering Centralians, it's so slim. I don't envision adding any other blue tongues to my repertoire unless these dream animals do become available.
So I have some potential good news.
Oh.
It's not 100% yet. I know someone that knows a shingleback breeder, and they reach out to them, and it's sounding like potentially at some point they will be coming on.
Now
But
there's so many different species of shinglebacks. It's really just the western rugosas, the Goldfields, which is like a separate sub natural morph that features a lot more orange that I'm interested in. I do know some people. I'm losing the name, but the like the hypermelanistic ones. What's that subspecies?
Easterns? Or are you talking just the black ones?
The shinglebacks, the all black shinglebacks. Why can't I think of what
Aspera?
they're? Yes, that. So I do know of quite a few people in the country that have Asperas, but they're not of personal interest to me. What you're
So
speaking about, are they rugosa or Aspera,
I
something else?
I think a little of both, or maybe more
Exciting.
than a little of both. I'm not 100% sure. This is coming from someone else talking to them for me that knows them, whereas I don't. I'm not 100% but hopefully we'll find out more when I can, because they have successfully reproduced at least some of them the last multiple years.
Well,
Some
that
of
is
them you do have to cool pretty cold, though.
yeah. And it's tough when you're trying to balance the mid-range northerns with the most of the Indians. They need the super tropical high humidity. I've got the Irian Jayas, which are a bit more skinkoidy intermedia related. They don't need as high humidity, but then with the desert species, it is a tough balancing act, trying to give everybody the exact environment they need within their enclosure, all in the same room. And if I'd have to take somebody out to cool them into like the 40s or the 50s that you do for your blotchies, yeah, it can get tricky. And so I get it. Are we thinking of the same family operation out of Florida?
No,
Or okay, well that's
at least I
exciting,
don't think
man.
so.
All right. Very exciting. Very exciting,
Uh,
man. We'll talk after the podcast.
but God, and I can't remember which ones need to be cooled, but it might be the Rugosa that do need to get into the 50s to potentially successfully breed.
We gotta crawl before we can walk. And
Yeah.
so I've researched their care. I haven't researched much breeding on them. If the opportunity became available tomorrow, I would be ready to care for them, and I would take my time to figuring out how to successfully breed them. But again, like I said, they're a very family oriented species, which I love, but it's quite intimidating. Can you separate the baby? What'll happen to the baby? And
I thought it was sorry to interrupt you.
no,
I thought it was mainly more so the parents were more like they watch the babies and take care of them, but there was more issues separating pairs versus babies from adults.
it totally can be done, but it's a mix of just roll of the dice and the personalities of the skinks and how they relate to the family. A lot of the information that I'm projecting comes from either Menno, the big collector in the Netherlands, who's got quite a few, or people in Australia working with them. And the general consensus is it's tough to sell babies and separate families because they all eat together, they live together, they recognize each other. They'll kind of, the way we handshake or the way we hug, they'll like bump noses, and they've been studied to have different greetings for different members of their clan. And so their family cohesive relationships, they're very intertwined, which I would love to observe, but I'd feel awful if I kind of crush their spirit by separating the clan.
Yeah. And that's something we might learn more over time, with the current breeders having smaller numbers and being more secretive. Over time, more have came into the country, and pre-CITES a good amount did. I think a lot of Aspera, but it's
I
still
did see
promising.
I did see some Rugosa coming in the few months after the CITES development was announced, but before the cutoff date. I
Yeah.
probably saw about 20 more enter the country.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So, promising future ahead of us,
Yeah.
especially if you're a blue tongue lover like us.
Well, and I think over time, more of those breeders will work together also, with even just something simple as talking to each other, being like, well, I put them down to 60 and I got no babies. It helps. It gives people insight on what to try for, the species they have. They're in a wider range, so it might vary per subspecies and species. I don't know if they're all here.
I mean, the Rugosa is another desert species, but they're a bit more mobile. Their territory is vast, and there's oases within the Australian outback deserts. It gets crazy hot and arid during the day, and like any desert, the temperature drops substantially in the evening. So they're used to bracing for these cooler temperatures, but they don't do well in humidity. The Centralian that I have, she does best at about 15% humidity.
Wow.
At 5% or 0%, her belly gets really rough. She gets dehydrated. 5%, it's okay. 10%, 15 is really her sweet spot. But once I go to 20, 25% humidity, she starts to get the flu. Humidity does not work well. To my understanding, the Rugosas do best at about 30%, 20 to 40% humidity is their range. And also once you start going beyond 40, 50% humidity, what the northerns and the easterns are used to, they start to crash and get sick. because their skin, their lungs, their whole immune system has evolved over thousands, if not millions of years to adapt to certain climates, which is why kind of transitioning right here, it's frustrating when there's so many different blue tongue species that range from these super hot, arid deserts, the middle ground, northerns, easterns, Tannenbars, up to the super high-end tropical 100% humidity range, Gygus species of Indonesia. And if you're trying to get into blue tongues, you might not realize just how many subspecies there are and the range that their care requirements, diversify. And you go online to try to do research, and it's all generic blue tongue information, but it's not species specific. And I think that's what is the starting point of misinformation, and why somebody is keeping a blue tongue for months or even years improperly. And now all of a sudden, these issues are catching up with the health of their skink. And then they post online and say, I've got this northern, I was told low humidity requirements, so I've got 30%. What's wrong? Well, you don't have a northern. You've got a Halmahera, a Gygus, something that might do best at about 90% humidity. And then the poster, instead of saying, oh my gosh, thank you, what can I do to adjust? They go, I don't believe you. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been doing this for 2 years without an issue until now. It's got to be something else other than I've been wrong for 2 straight years, which is tough to overcome, as well as tough to admit. And so that's why I'd like to preface, whenever you're getting into blue tongues, make sure your research is species specific, and don't trust anybody who is mislabeling an animal. The price might be right, but a lot of things can go wrong by buying from somebody who is misrepresenting the animal. Northern refers to Northern Australia. It'll never refer to Northern Indonesia.
I've heard that a few times, the Northern Indonesia, from, people trying to, we'll go make a quick buck. That was a new one, yeah. But
yeah.
One thing I noticed, and I think this is what some people don't talk a lot about, so mine do like it a little more humid, actually.
What do you keep your northerns at?
So I got the room at 50 about, usually all year round. I got dehumidifiers and humidifiers to try to make it a happy medium. Then if needed, mist when shedding. That way there's no respiratory issues. But it seems like if mine get under 50, they start getting some drier belly scales. Nothing harmful or anything, just I think maybe over time some adapt more. Like in Australia, the native ones, northerns, it's actually, some of them are more forest type where it is more humid, where others are more arid. And I think over the 30 years of captive breeding, they've had to adapt some, to certain climates. Like I've noticed skinks that I've got from Florida, when they're older, they take, maybe an extra year to adjust. Whereas, say, if I got one from you in Chicago and Minnesota, climate's relatively close. One of us might be a little warmer, a little colder, but, we're still learning, I guess, be the best way to put it. You know?
And I think the animals do evolve and adapt in captivity over decades. They couldn't be in any further of an environment from where they're naturally located. Mainland Australia to the Midwest of the United States, different hemisphere, totally different climates. A lot of changes for them that they've got to adapt to if they want to thrive. Mine seem to do best around 55% humidity. I'll let it drop to about 45% before I go through my process on how I add humidity to their enclosure. If you follow my YouTube channel, I got a real nice video on how I go about adding humidity into their enclosure. Since that video was posted, I've added a small percentage of play sand to the hot and humid side of their enclosure, and that has helped maintain humidity from a process that I used to do every week to 10 days. It's now gotten me to 2 full weeks. I only have to do that process about once every 14 days, which is nice on me. And so I let the humidity drop to about 40, 45%. And then I go through the process. It spikes it up to like 70, 75%. And then over the 2 weeks, it goes back down. So it stays within the range, but they seem to be most happy at about 55%. And then the Indonesians, it's only like, at least the ones that I keep, the Irian Jayas, I make the tank just a little bit more humid. They're closer to 60, 65%. When they get humidity added, their spike is at 80, 85%. And then it dwindles down to about 50% for them before I go through the same process over and over again. And that's really just a little bit more, a little bit less cypress mulch and a little bit more of everything else, which is play sand, sphagnum, peat moss, floral moss, organic topsoil. I put more of that in the Indonesian enclosures. It helps maintain a slightly damper environment. And I make sure that they are in my enclosures that have the least airflow, just to help maintain humidity just a little bit more. And that 10% difference between the Northerns and the Irian Jayas is really the only difference I do for them. And I put them through brumation. I breed them the same time, same diet. Worked out pretty well for everybody. Okay, so yeah, a lot of people have commented on this. When I started getting into breeding, it was a very common practice by all the other breeders to separate babies immediately. Like as they're dropping, as they're eating their own placenta, you nab the babies, separate them from mama. The rhetoric that I was fed is, well, mama's not going to be a good mama. As soon as she's done giving birth, she wants her space back. She might turn aggressive, eat the babies, especially if she went off food for a long time. She'll be really hungry and see them as babies, the babies as food. And so I'm like, okay, back in the mind, what'll I do to be the best breeder possible? Then I start connecting with people in Australia, people who are observing them in the wild, people who have been breeding them in captivity for year after year. And the resounding feedback was, separate? What are you talking about? Look at over here. They'd show me a video with the babies and mama together for like months. And it was just, they're all cool. They live in harmony. You just have to give them more space. If you're going to keep babies in the tank with mama for more than a handful of days, you need to give them more space, or else, they will get stressed out and problems can happen. But I just took their advice, and I've been doing that all the past 8 years without any issues ever. And I guess until I have problems to reevaluate my process, I'll always keep the babies in with mama. It's easier for feeding. The mama seems to really like it. Whenever I separate, no matter when I separate, it really stresses out mama. It angers her. I'm taking her babies, and I don't want her to feel like she's just this cash cow for me, this puppy mill breeder. She grew those babies inside of her, and she nurtures them. They eat together. She lets them, run all over her. It's truly a special experience it's probably the single greatest thing that I take from the breeding business is watching the interaction between mama and her babies the weeks I have them together. So you must have more space. You also need to time out when she's going to deliver, because she needs a big water bowl for her so she can get her body in and bathe and she can drink water. And you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to change water every single day, because with 22 or 50 animals, it's going to add up a lot of your time, as opposed to doing it every several days. But the babies will absolutely crawl into the adult water bowl and drown. There have been 2 times where I caught this and I was able to save the baby, and 2 times where I came to mama standing over the adult water bowl, watching her dead baby float on the water. And I didn't get there in time, and it was devastating. And so you need to remove the adult water bowl and put in something very small and shallow where the babies cannot drown in it. And it is those weeks that the babies are together, it will absolutely turn, it will create more time commitments for you. You might need to change the water a few times a day, because if there's 20 lizards in the tank all of a sudden, especially little babies, they're going to crawl into the water bowl and they're going to defecate. And then it's going to turn the water bowl into poison. And so you got to find this balance of, I can't have a big adult water bowl that might last me a full week, and I can't have something, so small. That's really is what you have to do, is you have to have something so small in it that the babies can access, and they're going to defecate in it. And so you got to constantly have new supply of water bowls on hand while you sanitize the old ones. But other than that, I haven't had any issues. I haven't dealt with any biting, any bullying. I've never experienced that point blank ever. And I had an issue last year. Normally the size of our business is 30 to 60 babies. And last year we did 100 babies. And I was not prepared. I didn't have the space for them. I didn't have the sales for them. I didn't have their forever homes lined up to that magnitude. And out of necessity, because I didn't have any other or better option, I kept the babies in with mom for 3 full sheds. And at that time, I felt like I really could have kept it up if I could have given them more space. As the babies were growing, there was just no more space. Unfortunately, I was able to rehome the babies, get them to their loving forever homes, or even some pet shops that I trusted and respected, for them to find forever homes. And I was able to get them out of mama's enclosure, but I kept them in there for 3 full sheds. Everybody is eating, growing, never had any issues, other than the water bowl instances. And so, let me be the guinea pig on that front and heed my advice.
So one thing Sandy mentioned, I've heard other people do, put rocks in their water bowl. That way they can use that as a platform so they can't drown.
I like that. You definitely need the right size rock where they can climb onto it. I did try that once, and I thought it was safe. And I even placed a baby on the surface of the water to see, will it get to the rock? And it did. And so I'm like, okay, great, I'm good to go. And one of the 2 times that I approached the tank to find mama staring over the water bowl at her dead baby, I wish I had hands. I wish I had the brain capacity to figure out what to do. All I could do was watch and hope. And it drowned next to the rock. It couldn't figure it out in the panic mode of, I'm in this water bowl. I don't know how to swim. I don't know what to do. And in that moment, it didn't figure it out. And so, if somebody else made it work, that's phenomenal. I don't have that success to share.
Yeah, and that's got to depend on, the size rock, to the depth of water, to the size bowl. The one thing previous years when I did that with the rocks, I noticed that was an extra step you have. You got to clean the rocks then too.
Yeah.
Because, they're going to get bacteria and stuff on them. So if you put those same rocks back into clean water, it's not really that clean then.
Yep. And if you boil or bake the rocks in the oven, the rock is going to retain heat for like hours. So once you're done sanitizing it, you can't put it in with the lizards for a whole nother day. And so you need to have all these rocks on resupply. What I found to be a better solution is putting them into the dishwasher on sanitize cycle. I trust that the sanitize cycle will do exactly what it's marketed to do. And the rocks seem to cool down a lot faster, like within an hour of coming out of that cycle. And so for any of the bricks I use, any of the rocks, really anything that I use, any of the decor, the water bowls, the hides, I either have stuff so cheap and inexpensive, I feel comfortable throwing it away. If bacteria, feces, other stuff is causing problems, or it's an item that can go in the dishwasher on a sanitized cycle. One of the two. I don't have a third type of material within their enclosure.
On the keeping the skinks together, and this was longer than 3 sheds. It was probably maybe even 2 months. Not last season, the season prior, we had issues getting the baby rack we ordered. It was supposed to arrive in March and it came in July. And well, the moms didn't wait that long, so we went with plan B, which we used the ones behind us and would set up certain groups, and then as they got bigger, make the group smaller. And it was either 3 or 4 together. One bit its sibling in the foot and damaged it. Luckily, it was able to brace and heal fine with no long-term thing. But so there might be a time that you can't keep them anymore. It's something to test as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are getting multiple blue tongues and banking on the guarantee that they can cohab within the same perimeter that your enclosure allots, you're going to go bankrupt real fast. Usually when long-term cohabbing for blue tongues, particularly the northern species, is successful, it's when you have ample space, large outdoor pens and pits, that are many feet in each direction. I'll give a little shout out to Tiki's geckos. Did you have Tiki's geckos on your show recently? Yep. Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, and they are welcome to correct me, they were using racks pretty regularly, and they're in Florida, and the weather allows the skinks to be outside. And they recently developed larger outdoor pens that cohab very small groups or pairs. And I love what they're doing. I love seeing what they're doing, and they're making it work with adults. But you can never get into this mindset of I'm gonna cohab, I'm gonna house multiples together, and I don't have a backup option. Because they can't. They're not in the wild. They don't have an infinite amount of space. They're captive by the perimeter you set within the enclosure. Jealousy, fighting, food aggression, territorial behaviors can totally happen, and you need to have a backup option readily available. So cohabbing is not a permanent space saver. It's not even really a temporary one. You still need that other enclosure on hand, available for the two fighting blue tongues if a problem does arise. That's my PSA.
Yeah, there's our 6x3x3, and last last I talked to them, they only had to swap out one male.
Yeah, I think I even saw, I could be mistaken, but I thought I saw a video of males living together, eating together, and there's been this common theme of, well, males are territorial and they're going to fight. Well, if you give them enough love and space and food, there's a lot less reason for them to display aggression. Yet still, it can happen, and you need to have a solution prepared.
Yeah, all theirs only have one male.
Oh, in the cohab at the outdoor pens, it's one
Yeah.
male and more females, or even just one female.
Yeah, some it's one female, and then others it's two female to one male.
Those lucky kings.
There's a bit actually doing it. Like Ron Kodo even has some outdoor ones that I didn't even know about. But
He's working with a lot of different species, and different species behave differently. You got Adrian over in Europe who works with Gygus gygus, and he cohabs all of them, and they're all massive, and they all live in harmony in captivity. And then I think the northerns are probably the most challenging blue tongue species to cohab, especially in captivity. They need more space, and they're probably the most popular too.
well, in certain ones, from a breeding standpoint, you got to warm up the male before the female, so you can't really keep them together if you're going to do that either.
Yeah. When it gets time to breed, you do got to separate to get their behaviors and moods interested in copulating the relationship, as well as once the female is gravid, the male might still be really horny, and she is sending signals of, hey, my window is closed, I'm gravid, and then he can get stressed out because he ain't gonna get that poo-tang he needs and wants, and she's gonna get stressed out because she's all done breeding for the year. And then once she's in kind of motherhood mode, raising those babies inside of her, she can get territorial and protective, and he might not understand that. And especially as the babies are nearing arrival, she might get really stressed out about this male in the enclosure. I've never really put a male together with the mother and her babies. I've tried interacting them on a very supervised level. Nearing delivery, the female gets very aggressive, very territorial. Hey, you're not going to pose any threat to my babies. And then one time I did put my Irian Jaya male in the enclosure with the mama and babies, and he really enjoyed interacting with his kids. I trusted him, so that was real great to interact. But after a very short while of complete supervision, mama got really nervous about him, and she turned aggressive, and then he got scared, and you yank them out and separate them before a real problem occurs.
I think they're keeping them together all the time. I plan on trying to get either Manny or Yoshi or one of them doing it to see how it went their first year outside. Especially Manny, he's got a good variety of groups, and that would give a good, I guess, ratio to see how well it does. If certain ones have litters, if it's better to have one male to one female, or that maybe that second female is what helps that male not overbreed them.
Yeah, that's just it. The hobby and our knowledge about their inner species relationships, we're continually learning something new, and we're continually pushing the envelope. And that's one of the things I really love about the blue tongue hobby, is those that are in it continually want to progress it forward, learn more, and build upon past information, all for the betterment of their care with us.
So I was curious, I guess, being you live close to Tinley, what is your thoughts on the show, and will you ever vend it?
It's unlikely I'll ever vend. It's just so expensive. It's like $2,000 to have a table, $2,000 to show up. You need a custom tablecloth. You need a banner. You need an on-site payment processor. Wi-Fi is almost impossible in that building with so many people. You got to have display boxes, and it's just more supplies that I don't have the capacity to store or the interest in expending for how little I would be vending. I have had some other buddies who did get a table, and I asked, can I throw you a little bit of money and take over a small section of the table? And they said, there's a wait list for that. There's a lot of people like you that would like the exact same thing. So maybe you and I or some other people in the hobby will pool resources and we'll get a table together, share the success and the headaches. I think the show is well presented. It's diverse with suppliers, product companies. They've got that whole book section. Who's the big bug sponsor that's there every year? Like Timberlane or something?
Yep. Timberland.
They're giving out free insects. It's great. It's a great experience. Come away with a few stickers. They've got some, over the last few years, they have created these breakout educational seminars on a variety of interesting topics. So I like to see the way that the event has adapted and evolved. My hesitation in recent years is a lot of people in the reptile hobby are anti-COVID. They might not be wearing a mask. They might not be vaccinated. They might be in denial that they're sick. And there's so many people in that small space moving around. I've been personally intimidated. Is it a hotbed for COVID or flu, strep, even the common cold, anything that goes around? And so the other thing is, it's so easy to impulse buy when you're there. Impulse buy on supplies, something you didn't need or want, another animal that you're like, yeah, it's so cute and the price is right and I just want it. And then all of a sudden you get into a situation where you've spent too much money and you're coming away with a lot more than you bargained for, that maybe you're ill prepared for. So I really only show up. It's in my backyard twice a year, every single year. So I really only show up when I have a specific purpose to be there. So you might see me there 1 out of every 4 shows. We're going into my 9th year in the hobby. Maybe because I've done some traveling in college. I lived in a different area. So maybe I've been in the Chicago area for, 20, 22 years. And I've been to Tinley 4 or 5 times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it seems like some people will travel from all around, and where others would rather, just get their stuff ordered through, pretty much any reptile company, distributor, breeder can ship now.
Yep. There's still some people that are apprehensive about it, but it's a total destination. There's people that book and plan vacations around the show, wanting to connect with other great reptile people that you might not get to interact with regularly if we weren't coming together for this reptile festival. And then it's Chicago, so there's always something to do. There's always nightlife and live music and great food and just seeing the sights. So if you're a tourist coming in, you've got my full stamp of approval to make a great weekend out of it. Come visit the city. And actually, just so you're aware, Tinley Park, where the NARBC Big Expo is held, is a South Chicago suburb. It is not in the city of Chicago, and I'm a North Sider, so I got to travel the whole length of Chicago, exit the city, and then get to Tinley. It's a lot easier for me than getting on a plane or traveling from another state. But it's not the easiest. When I say it's in my backyard, I mean, I still got to get in the highway and travel almost an hour.
Well, and the hard part with Chicago, sometimes the traffic, that hour trip could be 2.
So I guess if there was no traffic, I'd probably do it in about 35 minutes. But with traffic, I'm closer to an hour.
Okay. Yeah, and sadly, the time that I used to live a lot closer to that, I wasn't into reptiles, so I never went. Like, I lived in Northwest Indiana, so probably a half hour from there, maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But now it's 7 hours.
Well, hopefully when the timing is right and you're able to make arrangements, we'll see at the next one. Or the hobby's just going to keep growing and developing where we've got other great events, just like Daytona or just like Tinley. We'll just keep pushing the envelope, seeing how advanced we can make the hobby, how attractive we can make it. That brings in, regular Joes, animal enthusiasts that weren't necessarily exotic specialists. I've seen like little kids there celebrating their birthday. They just wanted to see and interact with animals that you wouldn't get to see anywhere else. So I'm all for the expo. I think it's great. I wish everybody would either show up healthy or mask up. One of the two, acceptable. What does grind my gears though about this event, and it's not so much Tinley as it is every expo everywhere, is the expo organizers. They're good people, good business sense. Somebody fills out an application, they're ready to pay. You take their money. You got tables to sell. You're not in a position to be so selective. You also might not be the expert running the expo as to the very unique and very specialized reptile, amphibian, arachnid that's going to be there. And you're not in a position as the event organizer to verify, are all the sellers representing healthy animals with the correct label. And it really frustrates and aggravates me when I see somebody that I'm interacting with online and then they post, I just picked up this animal at the expo. I was told it's, a captive bred Eastern. No, that is an imported Key Islander with a bad skin infection. They told me it was on sale for $500. I can find you that animal, a healthy version, for $300. And now they've like a bad taste on the hobby or the animal in general because they were taken advantage of, or they won't admit that they got a sick Key Islander instead of the healthy Eastern they thought they were bargaining for. They want to give the seller the benefit of the doubt, not these trolls online. And then the animal continues to receive the wrong care. And it doesn't work out for anybody except the vendor who got paid. And then they're gone in the wind. They're out of state, traveling, never to be heard of again.
What I think is nice, at least about NARBC, the Tinley one, in recent years, you need a vet check.
Ooh.
That there was, I believe, a vet that goes around even for people that need it. The problem, I would imagine, depending on how many animals they have, I don't know if a vet can see everything.
Yeah, some tables have hundreds of different animals. And I had also heard that too, but I was told it was like a volunteer vet made available, but not a mandatory check in order to display the animals you're vending with. So maybe things have changed, but again, I'm not a vendor, so I wouldn't necessarily be privy to certain regulations that the expo holds.
I guess it was always a rule, or at least for a while, but now they're actually enforcing it.
Good. Again, progress is what should be on everybody's mind. And I think we are successfully achieving that. I really do. Nothing's going to be perfect. History is never linear. And progress is usually slow. I think momentum is on our side. There's enough good people in the hobby that care a lot about the animals, want to continue learning, want to continue sharing knowledge and building on what we've previously learned. And so I'm happy to be a contributor to the exotics and the reptile and the blue tongue hobby.
So, where do you see Dave Skinks in 5 years then?
Hopefully, I'm still in business. I really, really hope I'm still in business. In a perfect world, I've expanded to Centralians and rugosa, the Goldsfield shinglebacks. In a perfect world, I would also like to get into the bug game and start getting into the Kenyan zebra skinks. But as long as I'm still in business, I'll be really happy. I'm also a single bachelor right now with no kids. And at any point, and it is a hopeful goal that those things change. And if I do have kids, priorities might change and I might have to downsize. I might have to scale back for the better because, I now got a family to support. But for right now, I would be thrilled if I'm still in business in 5 years, continually advancing my YouTube channel, the care guide, and anywhere else I can give back into the hobby. I really like to, push my care guide and my helpful YouTube videos so that way everybody can gobble up that information. If you want personal support from me, well, that comes free with being a client. But, I've only got so much time in the day. And if you're trusting your money with somebody else, that's really who should be your go-to person. If not, my care guide and the YouTube channels are always publicly available and accessible. I'd love to help everybody that reaches out, but I'd also really like to do some business with you because that's what's going to keep me going 5 years from today.
Yeah, end of the day, you got to keep the lights on, and you want to be able to keep your, everyone healthy. So since we're kind of getting to the 2-hour mark, I was going to wrap it up and we could always, have another one. What is one final thought that you want to leave our listeners with? Any great wisdom, advice?
Avoid impulse decisions. Do your research. Look at not just the animals, but the enclosures and the care process on who you plan on trusting with your money to make a purchase from. And if you're somebody on the internet giving feedback, try to remind yourself how the recipient might feel reading your comments. Try to be informative, educational, but courteous and polite as much as you can, even when somebody's aggravating you. And if you can't stay nice, it's okay to walk away and let somebody else comment. So, in conclusion, do your research. Make sure your research is good, especially on who you're trusting, where you're getting the animals sourced. And if you're contributing to the hobby online through various groups or message boards, try to be as polite and kind as you can. And if you can't, it's okay to walk away.
Yeah, we're all at different stages of learning. I've been in it 7, 8 years. I'm still learning. There's people that are in it 20 years still learning.
I'm still learning. I feel
Yeah.
like not every day, but every year, every few months, I learn something new, and never be closed to learning something new.
Well, I wanted to thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
If anyone is looking for you, I do have your link tree with all your links as well as your website in the description. I figured between the two of those, they should be able to find you.
Please.
Otherwise, I'm sure Dave Skinks on Instagram and Facebook.
YouTube, daveskinks.com. Yeah, I'm I'm always accessible. I publicize my cell phone. You can text me, email me. If I can respond as promptly as I can, I will. And I want to thank Alex and Blazing Blue Tongues for hosting this wonderful podcast and continually bringing on righteous guests that deliver key information that continues to advance our hobby through shared resources.
Well, thank you again, and thank you everyone that came here to watch.
Have a great night, guys. Thank you.